when Shiloh Hendrix said in that clip, where she was being confronted by the man that was recording her, and he said, "Why did you call that child the N-word?" And she said, "Oh, he's behaving like one." In those few words, she revealed the state of her heart, where she's already classified this child as a particular type of person. Thank you for tuning in to the Removing Barriers podcast. I'm Jay.
And I'm MCG.
And we're attempting to remove barriers so we can all have a clear view of the cross.
This is episode 204 of the Removing Barriers podcast. And in this episode, we will be responding to the Piers Morgan Uncensored show, where he had Myron from Fresh and Fit, MarcLamont-Hill, Lady Gaddis, and Ricky Slot. They discuss, among other things, Shiloh Hendrix and the viral clip of her calling a 5-year-old black kid the N-word, and the fallout from that, and the money she raised on Give, Send, Go.
Hi, this is Jay. MCG and I would like for you to help us remove barriers by going to removingbarriers.net and subscribing to receive all things Removing Barriers. If you'd like to take your efforts a bit further and help us keep the mics on, consider donating at removingbarriers.net/donate. Removing Barriers, a clear view of the cross.
All right, so we are going to be playing the episode and pause along the way and respond as we see fit. As for full transparency, we did do some editing. They were pretty minor. What we did, we censored some words, and also Piers Morgan team as well censored some words. Like when he played the clip of Shiloh using the N-word, he censored out the N-word. I took it a little bit further and I censored out the F-word and the S-word as well, among others that I didn't find appropriate. I also removed all ads from the episode that we are playing, and I also removed the intro and the outro. So without much further ado, here is Piers Morgan from the Piers Morgan Show.
Two recent stories in the US have laid bare the shocking levels of racial division in American society, amplified by extreme and viral takes on social media. 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony is a black teenager charged with stabbing a white boy to death at a school track meeting in April. More than $600,000 in donations have poured in, not for the victim's grieving family, but for his alleged killer. Last week, Shiloh Hendrix went viral after a video showed the young mother racially abusing a 5-year-old, allegedly for stealing from her young child.
Oh, let me just say that we are planning to do an episode on Carmelo Anthony. I think we're just going to wait until after the trial at this point, just to get more facts come out as things go along, but may not share much of our opinion on Carmelo Anthony outside of what is being said in this episode.
Call him a child? Did you call the child word?
And this is just the audio of Shiloh Hendrix when someone confronted her about calling a 5-year-old kid the N-word. And of course, you're going to hear a lot of beeps because not only did Piers Morgan beep out some of the words, but we further beep out some of the words as well.
It is my own business. You call him a Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again? Okay. All right, that's what you say.
You'll go digging through people's
Nobody digging through
A little kid just did. You don't.
That little kid, you call him the little child?
What if he acts like one? He's gonna.
Are you about to hit him? You chase him here?
He took my son's stuff.
So that gives you the right to call the child 5-year-old.
Well, as you can see, Hendrix doesn't deny using the slur. In fact, she...
Let me just stop here ask you there, because obviously you and I have 4 black boys. And since we're talking about the N-word, we ultimately going to be talking about race and stuff like that. And there seeming never-ending tension in the United States. I guess if you are at the playground and another 5-year-old kid should rifle through your diaper bags. I guess we don't really take diaper bags to the playground anymore because our kids are, the youngest is 3. But what would your reaction be just off of the bat?
I would.
Anything close to Shiloh?
No, I don't think so. I can't imagine calling a child a racial slur just because they're going through someone's bag. Not that I'm excusing the behavior, but you also need to realize that's a small child. They will rifle through things that don't belong to them and get into stuff they're not supposed to get into. And as adults, we see that and we just tell them to go away or not to touch what's not theirs. We send them back to their moms. I can't imagine completely flying off the handle and calling someone such a terrible word.
Well, we had a situation where we had a kid that would come over to our home and actually look through our windows. And I politely asked him not to do that, but I never call him any names.
Right. Children, the Bible says that foolishness is bound up in the heart of the child. They do silly, foolish things, and some of them know how to push your buttons. And we have to remember that they also have a sinful nature. And so since we're the adult in the room, I think all those things need to be pulled into consideration.
All right, well, let's continue.
He repeats it many times. That's all the stuff that's bleeped out. When a bystander in the park follows her with his smartphone. Hendrix set up a fundraiser on the same website as Carmelo Anthony's supporters, on which she wrote, "I called the kid out for what he was." Incredibly, that campaign has now raised more money than the first one, surpassing $655,000 at the time of taping the show. Well, the boss of the website, Give, Send, Go, is accused of facilitating brazen racism on a platform whose motto is "Money is temporary, Jesus is eternal. He will join me later." Liberals say this is exactly what they've been warning about, that the post-BLM backlash and the crushing of DEI has provided a fig leaf for outright bigotry. Conservatives were similarly outraged by the support for Carmelo Anthony, an alleged murderer who's been glorified by some as a victim of a racist system. We're here to debate all this as the host of the Fresh and Fit podcast, Myron Gaines, the host of Night School on YouTube, MarcLamont-Hill, Lily Gaddis, a social media commentator whose video defense of the N-word mother has so far been viewed millions of times on X, and the New York Post columnist and author Ricky Schlott. Well, welcome to all of you. Ricky, look, my take on this is a stain on all their houses, right? I just don't know what is happening to society when you have such vast sums of money being raised for what seems to me to be deliberate, racially charged, motivational reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're fighting ugly with ugly right now. And I think this level of racial tribalism and hostility is just simply not sustainable in such a diverse democracy like America. I think it's, one is really a reaction to the other. I think both campaigns are really hideous, and I think we're showing our ugliest colors. I mean, in the scheme of things, these are small sums relative to the population of America, but you do see, I think, a really tremendous explosion of ugliness and racial hostility that I think that we should all be ashamed and embarrassed of.
Yeah, I mean, you described it, I think, in one of your posts as genuine.
Now, let me say, I will not be agreeing with any of the guests on the show, nor Piers Morgan myself 100%, but I also don't disagree with any of them 100% as well. I think there are nuances here that we're going to discuss, but just to adjust the comparison between Carmelo Anthony and Shiloh Hendrix, at least here, I think they're comparing a little bit of oranges and apples kind of thing. I don't think they're really one-to-one in a sense, but...
You don't see the Shiloh Hendrix situation as comparable to the Carmelo Anthony incident?
Well, in one sense...
Because Carmelo actually committed murder, while what Shiloh did was just call someone a very nasty name. So
right.
It's like apples to oranges?
Right, in that sense. And also, I know they're kind of comparing the racial part of it, or the backlash, or the support, the tribal support of both sides, which I think, on that front, both of them are wrong. But anyways, I'm going to let the audio continue.
Is this a psyop? This would be the best $1 million invested by a foreign adversary to start a race war in America. And I knew exactly what you're getting at, because many of the I think the comments have now been suspended, actually, on both of these funding pages, because people were quite obviously deliberately misusing them to post race-baiting commentary.
Absolutely. I mean, if you go through some of the comments on either of them, you have White Lives Matter on one side, and like suggestions that the teenage boy who was stabbed was somehow like a manifestation of white supremacy, and it seems to be just a fight at a track meet that has nothing to do with racial hostility in the first place. And the poor father of this young man who died too said, please don't make this into a racial issue. And yet on his own Give, Send, Go campaign, there are comments after comment saying this is White Lives Matter, we're avenging against Carmelo Anthony's family. I mean, on all ends, this is ugly. I think that it's really co-opting the charity and giving community. I mean, I feel bad for the fundraising platforms because I don't think this was the intention originally. But unfortunately, I think that people are really starting to take over good intents and the charity industrial complex to make it into a victim industrial complex. And it's really sad to see.
Well, we're going to have one of the founders of the Give, Send, Go site a little later in the programme. But Mark Lamont-Hill, you were shaking your head there. I mean, what's your take on this?
There are a couple of things that were said that I think are really interesting and important. One, there is an outside audience of people who are watching all of this and opportunistically using it for their own agendas and projects. You know, I have an investment in believing X, so I'm going to jump in the comments of this GoFundMe, etc. I have an investment in Y. I'm going to do the same thing. But what I don't want to do is compare these two things as if they're opposite sides of the same coin. For me, the intention of the campaign matters. In the case of this woman who is using the N-word, the woman isn't disputing using the N-word. The woman isn't disputing being racist. And the comments that are being left on the site before they were suspended and the attitudes behind it weren't saying she's being railroaded, she's being misrepresented. They were simply saying, we support racism. And I think that's disgusting, no matter who's doing it. On the other hand, the people who are fundraising for Carmelo Anthony, the argument here isn't, yeah, we did something and we don't care, like the other woman. The argument is we're being misrepresented here. We're being railroaded. This was a self-defense claim. This is not an act of violence. This isn't first-degree murder. I'm saying what they're saying. This isn't my argument. They're saying this is a first-degree murder claim that is wrong. This is actually self-defense, and we need the money to make sure that we get a fair trial. I think, and so whether you agree with his argument or not, I think raising money for a fair trial is different than raising money for a racist.
So I'll say this, though. I agree with Mark Lamont-Hill partially, and that's true for everybody on the panel anyway. But I do believe that, yes, the comparison is not right because, as he said, they're not opposite side of the same coin. I do agree with him there. But I also believe that the tribalism is on both sides. And I also believe that he's making it seem like, okay, everyone who's donating to Carmelo Anthony just want him to have a fair trial because he's claiming self-defense. I don't believe that's true. I think based upon what you're seeing on social media, what you're seeing out there, a lot of folks really don't care because the person who was, should we call him the victim? I guess at the end of the day, once the case is decided, we will know if there's a victim or he was acting in self-defense. But there are some people that are donating because he killed a white teenager. Because I personally think that if the races were flipped, you would have tribalism again the same way. People will be lamenting, oh, how a 17-year-old teenager killed another 17-year-old black teenager. And it will be another George Floyd or whatever all over again. So I think he's been a little bit disingenuous there saying that they're only, and I don't think he said only, but that's the impression I get. He's saying that they are donating for a fair trial and they're donating in spite of the fact that she claimed that she used the N-word. And I just think that, of course, I think they're donating partly. Some people are donating partly because this is a black kid that killed a white person, and they'll say, hey, whatever, we're supporting you. It's almost O.J. Simpson over again, you know?
Right. I think I agree with you there. If it were flipped and the family had to raise funds for Carmelo Anthony's funeral or whatever costs associated with the aftermath of a murder, I don't think anyone that has issue with it the way it is now would have an issue with it in that particular way. Shiloh Hendrix claims that she's raising the money because as a result of the video having gone viral and pretty much the whole world seeing it, she has to move her family for their safety and other expenses involved with that as well. And so she's raising money for that reason. And so it's not just a matter of people donating because they are racist and they support her in her racist endeavors as they're claiming, but it's more of a, okay, we have to move. I don't have the money to do it. Can you help me? If the situation had been flipped with Carmelo Anthony, I don't think anyone would object to Anthony's family raising money in order to provide, like I said, funeral services or whatever else they need, maybe perhaps even money for the prosecution. And who's to say that she won't be prosecuted for what she said? Certainly, the climate, the political and legal climate in the country makes it so that prosecution won't be likely. It's funny because 5 years ago, I'm not entirely sure that would have been the case. But I agree with you that I don't think MarcLamont-Hill is seeing it in an even-handed way there.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I agree that she would be prosecuted. That First Amendment right is kind of hard to get over in terms of what Shiloh did.
Yeah, perhaps prosecuted is too strong a word, but to be put through the court of public opinion.
Well, she's getting that now.
And the money associated with having to protect yourself in that particular climate. That's perhaps what I should have said, right?
Yeah, but remember, the problem I have with all of this, and I think I kind of said this already, is the tribal leaning of it. Because quite honestly, I don't think this is a conservative or liberal issue. Not when it comes to Shiloh Hendrix, not when it comes to Carmelo Anthony. It's not a liberal or conservative issue, at least not in my mind. And it could be because I don't really define myself as being a Republican or Democrat, so I don't really care about being a part of whatever one party is thinking or not. So Shiloh Hendrix, she was frustrated that a 5-year-old autistic boy rifled through her back. Now, I guess she couldn't tell that he was autistic. I'm assuming, give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't know how the boy looked. Does he look older? Does it really matter if he look older? I would say no. But I just think that at the end of the day, it becomes conservative versus liberal. It becomes Democrat versus Republican. And that always gets messy. Even in recent history with the COVID vaccine. Got messy because it became a political issue. If you take it, you're most likely a Democrat. If you refuse to take it, you're most likely a Republican. And if it was flipped, where possibly if Trump had won in 2020 and Trump was pushing the vaccine, the Democrats, because we have Kamala Harris saying she wasn't going to take it if Donald Trump asked her to take it. And the same vaccine that Donald Trump was developing now became available under her administration, and she's pushing it. This party stuff does mess everything up. The politics stuff just messes everything up. Anyways, I'll let him continue.
I think the common theme between the two, and this is not to pass any view about it at this stage, although I have strong views about it, I guess the common theme is that both of them say that as a result of all the publicity, they've been doxxed and had all their personal details put everywhere on social media, which is, of course, the modern scourge which gets involved. And as a result, they've had death threats and they have security issues and they have to move home and so on. I understand that part of the argument. When you're at the center of a firestorm in America and you're not used to public attention, then the levels of intimidation, threats and so on that can come your way can be extremely intimidating, if not outright dangerous. So it's different really to taking a view about either of the cases to simply say that the commonality is that they both, I think, have said in defending the amounts that have been raised is, well, we have to defend ourselves. Either, as you're putting it, through the courts, but also in his case, the alleged killer, that he has also, I think, had direct threats against him. And in the case of the mother using the M-word in that despicable manner, she has said she's had a lot of threats too.
My quick response to that would just be, let's assume everybody's telling the truth. Let's assume she's telling the truth, and let's assume he's telling the truth. If he's telling the truth and he was doing self-defense and he's getting harassed and doxxed, and of course we already know lies have been told about his GoFundMe campaign saying they were spending it on mansions and cars, all the kind of racist tropes. If that's true, he's being...
I don't know if that's entirely false, though. I think he was exaggerated a little bit, but I think evidence is out there that he did use some of that money to move into a gated community and possibly upgrade in vehicle. But I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard and seen enough news articles and enough evidence out there that that might be true, but I'll let him continue.
Mistreated. And I think that's a sort of very easy case to make. When it comes to her, however, let's assume she's also telling the truth, that she used the word. She thinks the kid was acting like one. She feels like she has the right to use that word against that small baby because of whatever age-appropriate thing the kid did. If she's telling the truth and she's getting doxxed and harassed, I don't know if I want to reward her behavior with $500,000. I don't think she should be doxxed. I don't think she should be harassed. I think she has been mistreated to the extent that no one should be. You have a right to be racist. You have a right to free speech in this country. But I'm not donating money for it, and I feel a lot worse about her GoFundMe than the one for the person who's been railroaded.
Yeah. Well, Lily Gaddis, you posted a defence of Shiloh on X. It's been viewed 2.5 million times, in which it was entitled, "White People Are Finally Fighting Back. Stand with Shiloh Hendrix." What did you mean by that?
Here's the thing. White people have been under attack for years. It's been systematic racism. As much as Black people and people of color want to talk about systematic racism in the United States, it's quite the opposite. They get preferential treatment when it comes to getting a job, when it comes to getting into colleges. White people, on the other hand, have been getting attacked relentlessly. Look at 2016 and BLM and all the riots. We just had to sit back and watch people burn down our cities and do nothing about it. So the way to fight back against essentially this anti-white hatred that's been systemically, ingrained in U.S. society is with white unity. We don't see white unity on our side.
Hang on.
So there's like the problem, Again, I don't totally disagree with what she just said. True, and I'm speaking as a Black man. I'm not African American, but I'm Black. That even at my job, I was able to get away with, and get away might be too strong of a word, but I remember having a meeting with someone that's a leader over me, and I told that person plain blank that I disagree with Black Lives Matter. Now, I told that to someone who's working at a company that was pushing Black Lives Matter, was pushing DEI, and the person basically said nothing to me. But I can guarantee you that if that person was talking to another coworker who was white, they probably would have said something about the fact that they say they disagree with Black Lives Matter. Now, I didn't initiate the conversation. The conversation was initiated because the CEO of the company wanted the leaders to meet with everybody and talk about the social issues that were going on, just to get, what people's mental state are at. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just a free, open discussion that's one-on-one so folks can talk. But there's some truth to it. There have been a lot of Black privilege. And she talked about, of course, affirmative action, which the Supreme Court done well with, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Also talk about DEI, where people of color were given positions and stuff like that they probably weren't qualified for. And a lot of decisions being made on race. And of course, we know critical race theory and the hegemonic power all start with the fact that the white man is at the top of the racial ladder. And the further you away from a white, heterosexual, middle-aged guy, is the more victimized you are. So she's not totally wrong. Where she just lose her mind, in my opinion, is saying that the answer to it is now white tribalism, which that's not going to help this situation. Martin Luther King, just to quote him, he said that Black supremacy is just as dangerous as white supremacy. So we don't want to swap, and he even said that we don't want to swap one tyranny for the next. And I think somewhat is what she's saying.
I agree.
Okay, but hang on. Sorry, just to be clear, this has got nothing to do with anything you've just said. This is a disgusting, racist woman who repeatedly spews the M-word, first at a young child, and then at the person taking the video of her, does it with complete impunity, does it numerous times. We are talking about a bona fide, unquestionable racist. So I don't understand why what you've just said to me bears any relation to white unity or anything that you've just said. She's just a racist. Isn't she? You wouldn't dispute that.
It's not about her. It's not about her. It's about
white people
finally coming together and supporting another white person. And it doesn't matter.
Why would you want to support a white racist?
Because I want to support free speech, and you cannot have free speech in a country.
No, that's fine. You can support free speech, but you also have to be accountable for what you say. Would you use the N-word out of interest?
Yes.
You would?
Mm-hmm. I do, quite frankly.
You use the M-word quite frequently. Well, why? Other than the fact you're a despicable racist. Are you?
Some would say I am. I guess according to the ADL, I'm a white supremacist. I'm a neo-Nazi.
If you use the M-word repeatedly, you are a racist, then, are you?
Sure, I'll embrace that. If that means forwarding helping white people achieve freedom of speech, real freedom of speech, which, by the way, Shiloh Hendrix is being attacked on all fronts. They're trying to bring legal charges against her. They're trying to get her children taken away. So you were saying, Carmelo Anthony, it doesn't matter. That's a different
Sorry, but just to be
thing.
clear, you just said to me you use the N-word regularly. In what context? Do you use it with black people?
Yes, if it's appropriate.
When would it be appropriate to use the N-word? When would it be appropriate?
Anytime I feel like it.
So you're an unashamed racist?
Correct.
Well, do you understand that makes you a despicable human being?
All right, let's pause it for a little bit and talk about what she said. Again, the N-word. Firstly, personally, I believe that no speech should be censored. That might be a little bit out there and a little bit surprising, but I believe that bad speech should be countered with good speech, not censorship, because it becomes very, very difficult to determine what you want to censor. Now, obviously, on the Removing Barriers podcast is our podcast, and we determine that some words that we're not going to say, and there's some words I don't use, and there's some words that I beep out on the podcast if I'm using a clip, because I don't want to broadcast it. But that's me making a moral decision based upon my foundation, which I will say is the scriptures and God's word, that I'm not going to use certain words. Bible says in Colossians 4, verse 6, let your speech be always with grace and seasoned with salt, that you may know how we ought to answer every man. I can't say that my speech have always been with grace and seasoned with salt, but that's the goal. So now, personally, I grew up in the Caribbean. The N-word is not a word that is used per se, meaning in the U.S., African Americans would use the word with a hard A at the end. And then, of course, if you use it with the ER, that means it's a racial taboo to say that, and it's basically downgrading the person. You're basically putting them back into the fields of the massa, and basically saying that they're worthless, good for nothing, ignorant, and the list go on and on. It's the most derogatory word you can use to a black person. Not just a black person, but especially African-American person, because I think the word has the most stigma in America than anywhere else. But to me, the rappers use it all the time. And even Kanye's latest song, which I think Piers talked about it in a different episode. I think it kind of came up here a little bit. But everybody talking about the fact that he said, Hail Hitler, in that song. But before every time he says, Hail Hitler, he put the N-word before it. And of course, he was referring to himself. Of course, he used that hard A. So in some respect, can a white person use the word with a hard A and not get lambasted? No, but a black person can use it with a hard A or even an ER and don't get lambasted. But
they're not the same word. They don't mean the same thing. There's a cultural difference between the two. Maybe that's why it's...
That's true.
Right.
But where did the hard A come from?
It came from black people taking a word that was weaponized against them and them flipping it around and turning it into something meaningful.
Maybe we can look it up, but I think it comes from the fact that many of the Africans that were here, the ER is given an A sound a lot of times. And in a lot of words where we speak, even sometimes in the islands, an ER is given an A sound. And I think that's where it comes from. At least historically, I believe that's where it comes from. Now, they may have changed it and say, hey, with a hard A, it's okay. To me, both of them are equally bad, in my opinion.
Totally true.
In my opinion, both of them are equally bad. But it should not be acceptable from a black person or from a white person. It's always shocking to me. If you go back to what sitcoms in the 70s, and one of the longest running sitcom from the 70s until I think a recent sitcom kind of dethroned it, but it was the longest running sitcom on TV for a long time. And in there, the main character used the H word for the white person all over the place. And it's a big laugh. And even sometimes the main character used the N word. Funny enough, if you turn on caption on the show, they don't put it with a hard A. They put it with an ER from the main character. And the main character is black. The main family in the episode is black. So something change drastically as you come out of the 70s, because this show run from the middle 70s to the mid 80s. So as you get into the 80s and 90s, something drastically changed. I don't know if it was Rodney King or the LA riots or whatever changed, but something actually changed that's all of a sudden now we're censoring words. And I just believe that, hey, let people say whatever they want to say. I will choose and censor myself. I don't think we should be censoring words just because at the end of the day, they're going to start censoring the Bible. They're going to start censoring. It was just the other day, Nancy Pelosi stand up in the House and said they're going to stop using mother and father and all these gendered terms. And those will be censored. So we know, at least to some extent, where this censorship can go. Yes, as a society, we can all agree that the N-word should be used. But then you're going to go much further than that. So I don't agree with censoring words. And at the end of the day, again, some black people, to me, are being hypocritical about this thing. Because they don't have a problem calling the white person the H word or the C word or whatever derogatory word they want to use towards a white person. But if a white person use the N-word, all of a sudden they just come off the earth. Again, I understand the history. The black man never necessarily have, at least in North America, that the black man never had the white man in slavery. But if you go back, there were always slavery between tribals and racial groups and everything all the way back in history. At least we have 2 episodes that we did. Those episodes were the Bible and slavery. And then we have about 6 episodes on Black Lives Matter. We have episode 3, episode 4, episode 8, episode 27, 30, and 56, all about Black Lives Matter. And then we have episode 91 and 92, Slavery, the Bible, and Christians, that we talk about some of these things. So if you want to go back and listen to them, feel free to do so. But I just think that, hey, yes, we can all agree that the N-word is despicable. But at the same time, I still don't think it should be censored. To some extent, when it comes to freedom of speech, live and let live. If you think someone is nasty and whatever case may be, maybe you don't want to be friends with them, maybe you don't listen to their content, but to censor them, I have a different opinion.
One question that I would ask is, how much does our outlook on the future affect how we feel about censorship and the words that we use, particularly among Christians? So, for example, the post-millennial would say that it is our duty as Christians to advance and establish the kingdom here on earth until Christ returns. And so the laws should reflect what thus saith the Lord. And so we should be pushing for the type of laws that would outlaw inappropriate speech, that would outlaw obvious things contrary to the 10 Commandments, such as abortion, murder, things of those nature. Whereas the premillennial would more than likely take the position of, hey, let everyone say what they're going to say, don't do the censorship thing, and we are essentially going to keep it like that until Jesus comes back to set everything straight. And so I suppose your eschatology has a bit to do with that as well.
I don't see how that has a play in anything in this respect. I really don't. I think at the end of the day, if you want to say, okay, as Christians, I think we can go to the scripture. Of course, the Bible says that you have your speech be always with grace and seasoned with salt. So if you're being led by the Holy Spirit, you're going to sense some of the words that are coming out of your mouth, some of the thoughts that are coming into your mind and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, James have almost a complete chapter. James chapter 3 have a complete chapter on the tongue and what it can do. So I don't see how eschatology has anything to do with this. Of course, in Matthew, Jesus talk about, for out of the heart of men perceive what? Evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornication, theft, false witness, and blasphemies, and stuff like that.
Let me go back.
The Bible says, as you think it in the heart, so you see. So I don't think that end times have anything to do with this whatsoever.
Not necessarily end times, but because of your view of the end times, that would affect how you behave in the world today.
Has anything to do with your speech and how you speak.
I'd like to go back to what the second lady said, the one that confirmed that she was a racist. And I understand that in that particular exchange with Piers Morgan, she was simply, well, I don't want to assume, but it sounds like she was taking on the racist title simply because people would call her racist because she feels like white unity is the answer. It's kind of like how a lot of conservatives reacted to Hillary Clinton's deplorable comment, and so they began to wear the deplorable title or description more proudly in order to mock her and to say, well, yeah, I guess you want to call me deplorable, go ahead and call me deplorable. I want to go back to what she said, though, because Proverbs 15, verse 1 through 2 says that a soft answer turns away wrath. But when you say a harsh word, it stirs up anger. She equated Shiloh Hendrix's actions along with the subsequent support for her on Give, Send, Go as backlash, as, quote, white people fighting back, tit for tat, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And so what she's saying that's coming completely out of her mouth is completely anti-Christian. It's not even conservative, I would say. But we've said multiple times on this podcast a warning that Christians should not confuse their conservatism with their Christianity, because embraced too far, embraced too strongly, you end up with words like hers. You end up with a mentality like hers. They already are talking about something called black fatigue, where not just white people, but society as a whole are getting so sick of these so-called, air quotes, black people and their entitlement and the Black Lives Matter and the intersectionality and the poor behavior and all of these different things. One thing I would like to just point at is to be careful when that kind of thinking creeps in. You can easily start to think of other people as less than. You will easily begin to forget to see the image of God in every single person. That's including the so-called black person that you think is behaving a certain way. When Shiloh Hendrix said in that clip, where she was being confronted by the man that was recording her, and he said, "Why did you call that child the N-word?" And she said, "Oh, he's behaving like one." In those few words, she revealed the state of her heart, where she's already classified this child as a particular type of person, a particular class of person, already a less than. And I hear that same attitude in this second commentator right here. Not the first lady, but the second lady that wore the racism.
I think her name is Lily Gladys.
Lily Gladys.
Gaddis.
Lily Gaddis. She sounds just like Shiloh Hendrix. And that is a sinful and dangerous place for anyone to be. The Bible is very clear that, well, let me go back and say that even Jesus set the example. When he was reviled, he didn't revile back. The Christian would not behave or speak in those ways.
Well, should not. The Christian should not behave in that way.
No one should behave in that way.
Well, that's true, but I'm just saying, you said the Christian will not. I'm saying.
Oh, like there are Christians that would? Well, that's another conversation to be had for sure. Our pastor always says that we shouldn't be surprised when the world is behaving like the world. But when Christians are behaving like the world and they're failing to hold up the truth of Scripture, we should be absolutely appalled. And of course, those aren't his exact words, but the same idea here is that. Just a warning. As Christians, we can be sick. I am over the discussion of race and racial tension and political turmoil in this country. I'm over it. I see how futile it is to engage in that continual cesspool, but we should be careful not to allow our being weary of the situation to allow us to slip into thinking like Shiloh Hendrix or like Lila, what's her name? Lily Gaddis. That's a very dangerous and sinful path to go down.
Well, you mentioned black fatigue, and I'm hearing two different definitions of black fatigue. On one side, they're saying black fatigue is black people saying that they're tired of being victimized, tired of being racially profiled, tired of being all these things. Mm-hmm. And on the other side is saying what you said, we're tired of black people getting privileges and we're tired of them complaining, blah, blah, blah. So I don't even know what the term black fatigue truly means.
That's actually true. I hadn't heard the first definition that you mentioned.
Because both sides are using it. But at the end of the day, Lily Gaddis, while I do agree that to some degree that the white person, especially for the last couple of years, have taken the bitter end of the stick in terms of many things that happen in society that they've been blamed for when they shouldn't. And yes, there have been racism towards white people.
Sure.
Yes, they have been. But I don't think her solution is the answer. Actually, I know it's not the answer. But anyway, let me continue.
I guess so. I don't really care. I mean, why are we not talking about Shiloh Hendrix? Why are we talking about?
Well, actually, I think you've moved it on in this debate very quickly to your own racism, which explains why you've supported her in public and why you've got all these views. You see no problem with a woman shrieking the N-word repeatedly because you yourself are a despicable racist. And you've just proudly admitted that with a smug grin on your face, which is pretty horrifying, actually, for most people to have to watch. And shame on you. You're entitled to do it, and I'm entitled to call you despicable.
Well, shame on white people for allowing themselves to be systematically discriminated against in the United States. This is our country. This is a country that should be...
What do you mean your country?
Because I'm white and my...
Well, there are no black people in American history. Is that what you're saying? That they've all just landed in America, invading your white country? Is that your position?
She's insufferable. She's insufferable. I feel the blood in my veins boiling.
Well, let me say
listening
this.
to her speak.
I think she is, lack of a better term, trolling Piers Morgan. Of course, we're only playing the audio. If you watch the video, which will be linked in the show notes, I could be wrong. I'm not a body language expert, reading somewhat body language. But to some extent, I think she's trolling Piers Morgan. Similar to what you said, just kind of saying, yes, yeah, I'm a racist, whatever the case may be. Is she? Maybe she is. I'm not going to pass the judgment, but I think to some extent she might be trolling.
I don't think this is trolling. I think she's saying exactly what she is and what she believes. Because trolling, granted, there's an art to trolling, but trolling is simply putting the person that you're engaging with in a position to behave in such a way to prove your point. That's what trolling is. She's gone beyond the level of trolling now. To say things like, shame on white people for allowing this racism against us to continue, and then goes on to say things like, this is our country. Well, no, ma'am, it's not your country. It's our country. And so what I mean by that is that, see, I guess she trolled me because now she has me sounding like people, the intersectional people on the left. Before, this country is a melting pot of many, many different groups of people. The Native Americans that were here before the Europeans came, the Europeans that came over, and the Europeans that fled some of the circumstances that were prevalent in Europe at the time and came here, the Africans and the other people that were brought here and enslaved, the immigrants from China and from other countries that escaped here in order to find. This is not just what she said is our country, this is why I believe that she's gone beyond trolling here, and she's simply revealing the state of her heart. Matthew 12:36 says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word that they speak. The Bible also talks about...
What version of the Bible are you reading from there?
I'm paraphrasing.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm paraphrasing. Oh my goodness, I'm paraphrasing. Just spitting it out as I remember it. Okay, she's gone beyond the level of trolling there. And so I think she's revealing exactly what's in her heart. Matthew 15:11 talks about it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out of your mouth. And it reveals the state of your heart. When you say things like that, you're just revealing there's a window into what you're actually thinking and what you actually believe. So she may have at the beginning been trolling Piers Morgan and repurposing the label of racist in order to prove her point. But I think she's gone beyond that now and has shown that she actually believes these things and is actually racist or white supremacist. And I don't put that label on people very lightly because it's been thrown around in recent years. If you happen to look at someone wrong, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a this, you're a that. So I don't throw that term around lightly. But when I listen to her speak, she strikes me as completely insufferable. And I think that she believes what she's saying. And so she's beyond the realm of trolling. I would be comfortable labeling her, or at least suspecting that she was of the white supremacy flavor.
Yeah, I don't know. I personally, a scale of 1 to 10, being 10 being she's a total racist and 1 being she's not a racist, I'll probably be at a 6.
Oh my, you are generous.
She's probably a racist. I don't know.
I'm 8.5, 9 right now.
I just couldn't read just her body language and everything. I think Piers Morgan is kind of being holier than thou somewhat with her.
Now that is true. He's trying to evoke some type of conscience, some type of shame on her, right. And she's like, nope, that's not going to work on me.
Yeah, so I think that's what probably is triggering some of this. So I will say a 6 just because she's clearly agreeing with it. But if she and I speak privately and she said, you know what, I just don't like certain behaviors, and everybody can agree with that. So anyways, we continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were brought here technically.
My God, do you understand how dumb you sound?
This is stupid. This is stupid and racist. And at some point, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to reward this kind of disgusting behavior by platforming it?
I don't disagree, Mark. Listen, I didn't know she was going to say that. I don't disagree with you.
No. no. Yeah. I'm with you. I don't think you knew ahead of time. I'm saying at this moment, someone who's saying it's technically black people brought up. No, technically, Africans were stolen, enslaved, and they built this country. And the idea that you
see that again why I say I don't agree with everybody totally, because were black people stolen from Africa?
Yes, they were.
Stolen by whom?
By both white people and Africans as well.
Remember, most white people that went into Western Africa didn't survive because the diseases they weren't accustomed to. Most of the slaves were actually prisoners of tribal war or in tribal fighting that were sold to the Europeans.
Yes.
At a certain point, the Europeans stopped going inland and were just...
And before that point?
Buying slaves. So what I'm saying is, when are we going to start blaming the West Afrikaners for slavery? Some of the families in West Africa are still rich to this day because of generational wealth from slavery.
Yes, and many of the people in Europe are rich to this day because of the wealth generated by slavery.
Yeah, that's true. But
yes, we absolutely will hold the Africans. Let me just finish this thought. We absolutely will hold them responsible for slavery, but the European colonizers are equally responsible.
That's not my point.
What was your point?
My point is that he's totally putting the blame on the white man.
Well, he's
MarcLamont-Hill, though. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
We know that he thinks that white people are the cause of everything.
The help of the West Afrikaners, slavery, the triangular trade between Europe, the Caribbean, and America would be impossible.
I think that's a stretch. I don't think
it would be.
It would be more difficult. And it would take a longer time for it to be as profitable. But there is absolutely no way they would have
difficult to the point that they would not be able to do it at the extent that they did it.
I agree.
Essentially would have been significantly reduced, especially if the African nations had said no. Because again, go and listen to episode 91 and 92, significantly reduced to the point where it probably would have just been a blip in history that Europeans tried to kidnap black people from Africa. And it didn't work because the Africans fought back. It was the Africans, in my book, that are majority to be blamed because they're the one who sell their own people. Well, again, I said their own people, but that's not true because what it was tribes. And if you weren't part of their tribe, you're not their people. So their people was necessarily the color of their skin. We boil it down to the color of our skin, which is wrong. They're boiling down to the tribes. They're the one who was selling people. So who is to be blamed? I would say, of course, I think the blame of the go on Europeans to some extent. But I would put majority of the blame on the Africans. They're the one who sold their own people, quote unquote, if you want to put it that way, even though they don't really see it as their own people because you might be from a different tribe.
So the enabler is to be blamed.
Well, you know what the old saying said, the enabler is worse than the thief.
So then the population in Europe that absolutely wanted this cheap labor, the free labor, wanted the sugar, that wanted all of these things.
I'm not saying that there's no blame to be placed.
What I'm saying is the blame is equally spread everywhere.
I disagree with the equal.
Where MarcLamont-Hill goes wrong is that naturally, based on his ideological positioning, he places the blame squarely and solely on white people. And he almost never acknowledges the role that Africans had in the transatlantic slave trade. However, to put a majority of the blame on the enablers, we have to realize that there were enablers in both camps. There would not be a slave trade if there was not demand in Europe and in North America for the sugar, for the cotton, for the fill in the blank.
And the same is true for if the Africans didn't sell the prisoners from different tribes. That's true. And again, because of the disease that would wipe out the white man so quickly when they stepped foot on land in Africa, it would have been significantly reduced. It was made extremely easier for them to swap mirrors and whatever else that they give the African people for slaves than if they had to go inland in Africa, hunt them down and bring. I'm not saying some of that didn't happen. They did do some of that, but they found out pretty quickly that wasn't the best approach. And again, one of the big reasons was the diseases that didn't have immunity to. So majority of the slaves were sold to them. Majority of the slaves were captured. Majority of the slaves were sold. And if that's true, the majority of the blame should be placed on the Africans.
Here's why I disagree with
benefit.
You.
Not only that, as I said, the enabler, as the old adage go, is normally people view it worse than the beneficiary.
We just said earlier about something that our pastor said, where we shouldn't be surprised when the world is behaving like the world, but we should be floored when Christians are behaving like the world. The reason why I don't put all of the blame squarely on the Africans that sold other Africans
But I didn't say all of the blame. I said most.
I wouldn't even put most on them, because they were pagans, they were heathens behaving like pagans and heathens. The Europeans that initiated the transatlantic slave trade were people enlightened by the scriptures, a great society built upon the scriptures in many ways.
I disagree with that.
I'm not saying that every single person was saved, but to say that the scriptures were not the prevailing thought, the prevailing culture, the prevailing means of thought for that particular group in Europe would not be
remember
true.
where slavery started. Slavery started among the Slavic people, at least the earliest history of it, the Slavic people. That's where the word came from.
Okay.
So before technology, shipping, what people used to do, they enslaved their own people. We know in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, the Egyptian had the Jews in slavery.
Yeah.
So slavery was a thing that you enslave your neighboring tribe. You go to war with them, you conquer them, and you enslave them. Of course, it went to a different height when the advancement of ships and stuff like that they were able to transport them. So this thing has to do with whether or not you're enlightened or not enlightened or whatever the case may be. It was just the morality of the day. We are judging it today by our stuff. Slavery was commonplace in that society.
That doesn't make, I know you're not saying this, but that doesn't make it okay.
What I'm saying is, not that it make it okay, but that make it ripe that when the European shows up and say, hey, whatever the case may be, well, you already have all these slaves, you have something that I want, let's swap. And that, again, is the majority of where the slave come from.
So purely a business decision, not one guided by any sort of spiritual,
I would say so.
Or biblical parameters.
No spiritual, nothing. It was more of, you have something I want, and we make an even trade. So basically, the fact that there's still African families today that have generational wealth because of slavery tell you the same thing. So again, I'm not saying that there's no blame to be placed on the Europeans and the others that help facilitate it. But to me, the enablers are way worse. And in my opinion, if the enablers didn't allow it, it would not be to the extent it became, because the white man would not have been able to do it. Of course, you can make an argument, maybe they have superior weapons, but I think that the Africans could have fought them off if they truly didn't want them to take people from their country to a foreign country. I truly believe that. Anyways, I guess I'll let MarcLamont-Hill continue.
You can justify calling a baby the N-word by saying that white people are losing the country is absurd. It's morally bankrupt, and it's honestly besides the point. I mean, all these are just distractions from the fact that she wants to justify dehumanizing and even animalizing a small black child. It's disgusting.
What is it?
Yeah, I never said that.
No, but you may as well have done, because you're just an unashamed
that's the implication of your
racist. Let me bring in Myron Gaines, because you've been smirking and laughing. What's funny about any of this?
Well, I mean, I find it interesting that you guys want to virtue signal and, wag the finger and say she's a racist and everything else like this.
No, she admits she's a racist.
Well, let me
I'm not wagging a finger at anybody.
She's self-identified as a racist.
But Myron, with respect, Myron, I don't need to wag a finger when somebody says, yeah, I'm racist, I use the N-word against black people, I don't care. That's a racist. I'm not wagging any finger. I'm not accusing anybody. She is admitting it proudly. Even you can't defend that, surely.
Everybody is racist to some degree. The reality is, it depends.
No, I disagree with that. And I think, I don't remember exactly what he's going to say, but I think he's going to go on and talk about being prejudiced or whatever, stereotyping. I don't believe that if you stereotype somebody, you're racist. I don't believe if you have prejudice to some degree towards someone that you're racist. I think I would agree that all of us stereotype people. A funny story, when I was in college, I don't remember, I was sitting at a table and there were some folks, I think there was a girl and two guys or whatever from the continent of Africa. I think they were from Kenya. I don't remember what country they're from, but I don't remember they're from Africa. And people sitting around the table, someone asks, one of the Africans, about lions and tigers and all that stuff. And they start laughing and say, the first time I saw a lion was when I came to America and went to the zoo. I remember the girl saying, hey, we don't step out of our house and there's a lion in our backyard kind of thing. But most of the time when we stereotype someone from the continent of Africa, that's the idea you're getting, that they surrounded by deadly snakes and stuff. Even when people stereotype Australians of all the crazy animals they have over there and stuff like that. I don't think stereotyping someone is racist. I remember this lady from, where's she from? Nairobi, Kenya, I think she's from. She's an author, and she said when she went to Mexico, she expected all these kind of things because in the U.S., the only thing she heard about Mexican is that all of them are trying to get across the border, whatever the case may be. And she was surprised that when she went to a big city in Mexico to see people buying and selling and having fun or whatever the case may be. I don't necessarily think stereotyping people is wrong, especially if you're not doing it in a malicious way. And just to go back to this lady, she said, hey, the problem with stereotyping is not that it's wrong, it is that it is incomplete. And I would agree with that. I don't think having a prejudice somehow is that you're racist. I think, of course, if you're racist, you're stereotyping, you have a prejudice, but I think you go a little bit further than that, where you actually withholding or judging someone maliciously based upon those things. And then, of course, a lot of black people will say, also, you must exhibit some level of power, which I do disagree with. I don't think you have to have power over someone to be racist towards them. I think you can have ill will towards someone just because of their color of their skin, of course, in U.S. terms, because a lot of times we talk about race, we kind of exclude ethnicity, which in my book is different. And that's why people from the Caribbean, like myself, and even people from the continent of Africa, may have a different view. And Myron is actually from the continent of Africa. And he has a different view than MarcLamont-Hill, who is an African-American. And the reason why is not the color of the skin, is more culture, because to be African-American is not just the color of your skin, but it's the culture that you exhibit, is the community and neighborhood that you grew up in and all this stuff. And he have a different view than someone like me or someone like Myron, who, though we are black, wasn't raised as African-American.
I would say that there is a difference between prejudice and stereotype. I think that prejudice would be like racism light. If you say you're prejudiced against white people or prejudiced against black people, that's a hip jump. What do they say? A jump, a hop and a skip from being racist. You're prejudging someone based on some sort of superficial or external feature.
I would agree, and he didn't say that, but I don't think it's necessary if quote-unquote full-blown racist. I think all of us have some level of...
Definitionally, it would have to be, right?
Well,
like if you look at someone, you're prejudging that they're going to be a particular way because their skin is black or because they're...
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily have to be something bad. Because if you see a 6'5" athletic built black guy and you assume that he's good at
basketball.
And he's good at basketball,
yeah. Okay.
No one would say that's racist.
I would say that's more of a stereotype. If it's not bad, it's a stereotype. But if it's bad, it's prejudice.
I don't know. But I'm just simply saying, I think being racist has a little bit higher level than just prejudice and stereotyping.
Okay. All right.
That would be my view on that. This is the Removing Barriers podcast. We will be right back.
Are you looking for a consistent and reliable place to get all your Christian materials? Try ChristianBook.com. Started from humble beginnings in 1978, ChristianBook.com now offers a wide range of books, CDs, DVDs, homeschooling, and church supplies, plus more. So whether you are a parent, a homeschooler, a pastor, or a layperson, ChristianBook.com can be a one-stop shop for all your needs. Click the link in the description section below and check out the vast array of Christian materials ChristianBook.com has to offer.
Depends on, a lot of people want to be politically correct. A lot of people want to sit there and say, I'm not racist at all. We all have biases. We all have stereotypes. We all make jokes. We all are racist to some degree. Now, how racist you are is a whole other situation, but everyone is racist. That's number one. Next thing I want to say, see, I think this Shiloh Hendrix and Metcalf situation is a microcosm of a much bigger problem. And that bigger problem is what I call systemic organization. And what I mean by this is for decades, we've had black people literally running around with black supremacy, committing crimes, not getting accountability for their actions, and then they blame the system for it. For example, George Floyd, criminal. Ferguson, criminals. Freddie Gray, criminal. A lot of these people are criminals, and what ends up happening is they challenge the police officer, they get into a physical altercation, things go left, they die, something happens, use of force is utilized, and then they want to cry about the result, when in reality, it's not the police killing black people, it's black people killing black people. And if you want to talk about black on white violence, black people kill white people 2 times as much. And on top of that, most of the shootings in America, a lot of the times, are white cops killing other unarmed white men. So this whole systemic racism or police brutality or, oh, it's all so messed up.
All that he's talking about That's facts. When all this thing happened in 2020, I did some research, and in 2019, there was about 1,000 folks that were shot and killed by police officers in the United States. 95%, I think, of that, they were armed. So if you drop 950 of the folks that were shot by police, take them out, you're left with 50 people that were shot and they weren't armed, at least physically have a knife or gun in their hand. And if you look at the percentage of that, it was about 12 of them, I think, that were black. About 25 were white, and the rest were other race. And even if you go back to the 1,000, it was only about 250 of them that were black. So this thing is blown way out of proportion, where it is true what he's saying. Not only are white people more likely to be shot by police, their studies have been done by black people that confirm that a police officer will say that they are most likely to shoot at a white person than a black person. And FBI statistics show that white police shot more white people than black people. Again, the argument is made, those are raw numbers. If you look at it as a percentage of the population, yes, because a lot of time people say, oh, there are more black people in prison than white people. That's not true again. As a percentage of the population, the percentage of the black people in prison is higher than the percentage of the white people. But if you look at raw numbers, there are more white people in prison than black people. But of course, you're talking about 150 million people to about 44 million people. So the population of white is about 150 million. In the US, the population of black is about 45 million. So if you go back to the 1,000 number, about 2,500 of those were black, which will be about 25%. But about 50% of that will be white. However, you're talking about out of 45 million and out of 150 million. So that's where the numbers get mixed up, where people say, oh, there are more black people in prison. No, they're not. There are more white people in prison, but as a percentage of the population, the percentage is higher because the population is smaller. Anyways, shall continue.
The reality is this. Black people have been able to get away with a ridiculous amount of privilege in America for a very long time. They're able to be racist with impunity. They're able to call white people crackers without being challenged back. And quite frankly, white America's had enough of it, and the chickens have come to roost. Now, look, am I saying that's awesome? Am I saying that's great? No, but for literally the better part of almost 2 decades since the Obama era, we've had to have BLM and liberalism shoved down our throats, and quite frankly, we're all tired of it.
Right, but just to be clear, you would have no problem with one member of this panel openly saying she uses the N-word at black people with impunity and is proud of being a racist. You have no problem with that?
My worldview on the protection of the First Amendment and freedom of speech overrides my personal feelings. She has the right to say
That's fine. You can support the First Amendment, but you can also have a personal view about what she said.
My feelings are irrelevant. The Constitution is the Constitution. That's what matters.
Oh, that's fascinating. Hold on.
So I'm going to pause MarcLamont-Hill there a little bit. I personally have never had someone use the N-word towards me. So I don't know how I will react or feel towards it. I probably just whatever it in some respect. I know one time the N-word affected me. I was coming home from work in a big city, and there was a young black guy, clearly homeless, or at least appeared to be homeless, dirty clothes, dirty shirt, dirty locks. And he had a sign that he said, I don't remember exactly what the sign said. I just remember the phrase. So basically he was saying, hey, anything would help, need money for food, something like that. And then the last line was, help an N-word out. From what I can remember, I think it was the ER. Could have been the hard A. Can't say I quite clearly remember, but didn't take a picture of it or anything. But I think it was the ER. I remember thinking about why would you use that term about yourself? I felt sorry for him, if you want to put it that way. There was some level of empathy there because he used that word towards himself. But to some degree, I agree with Myron. Let people say whatever they want to say. Now, of course, you can make your choices. You can't choose the outcome. So if she's a person who loves to use the N-word, and then maybe society, if we have a decent society, they would not listen to her content and she will eventually move on if the content making is her bread and butter, the way she lives, or whatever the case may be. But I don't think that the word should be censored. But that's my view anyway.
So when it comes to chastising Black Americans about their behavior, about calling white people crackers, as you say, about their moral claims about the racist system, you can levy a judgment against Black Americans for all the things they do. But when it comes to this woman saying the N-word, and this other woman endorsing it and saying that she herself uses the N-word, now all of a sudden we can only talk about the Constitution and the legal right. We can't offer any moral judgment against it. That's disingenuous. And it's as the only Black American up here, that's quite frustrating to hear.
Here's the thing. If you want to be soft and get offended by that, that's your problem, not mine.
Let me ask Ricky.
We're not even.
Let me ask Ricky.
This isn't about being soft any more than when you were desperately saving these white people.
Hold on. This sensitive nature that you have is precisely why we have this problem.
It's not about being sensitive. It's about I didn't articulate. Hold on. Let me finish, Myron. Let me speak, and then I'll let you respond. Myron, sure. I didn't articulate any sensitivity here. What I said, in the same way that you levied a judgment against Black people, I'm levying one against the claims you're making. I'm no more sensitive than you were when you made your claim. I'm simply saying I disagree with you. And to immediately jump to you're being sensitive is just a distraction. I'm making an argument here. Just respond to my argument.
No, and my argument to respond to that is this. Political correctness, liberalism, and making sure that we are politically correct and don't use certain words could offend people is precisely why we're in the situation that we're in. For decades, we've had to literally tiptoe around saying certain things around certain people, while the other group of people has been able to have impunity and be able to be as racist as they want to be, as violent as they want to be, without any type of consequence. And if you call it out, you're labeled a racist. The reality is this. Black people don't want to live around Black people. I don't want to live around a bunch of Black people. I move to neighborhoods where it's majority white because I know I'm safe. Now, this is uncomfortable reality that no one wants to say, so I'll say it for them. Black people commit a lot of crimes. A majority of the violent crime committed in the United States is committed by a small percentage of people, and they tend to be Black men. Look, the reality is the reality. People don't want to say it, but the political correctness and being nice and not wanting to tell the truth is precisely this problem. And the reason why you're seeing all the support for Metcalf and Shiloh, etc., is because white people have not been able to step up and say what they want to say for a very long time because of what I said before, systemic, organized, where they don't take accountability for their decisions.
Let me bring in Ricky.
So, again, I don't totally agree with him, but he has a point. When a Black person in the U.S., especially those who were brought up in what we call the hood, I'm thinking about the LeBron James of the world. When they get money, where do they go to live? They don't stay among Black people. They don't stay in their community. They don't buy a home or build a home in the community that they grew up in. They move into the affluent communities. And who are the majority of people that live in those affluent communities? White people. So, and it's true, even if you don't go to the LeBron James level, there's a lot of middle-class Black people that don't want to live in what, AKA, the hood. That's just a fact.
That has nothing to do with the fact that these people have brown skin. It has to do with the fact that the crime rates are extremely high. So to say that the direct correlation there is simply because of the color of their skin, I don't agree with that.
I don't think he said that, though.
That's like saying, well, that's precisely what they're saying when they say, oh, well, when you become affluent and when you get money, like Myron was saying, Black people don't want to live among Black people. It's not because they're Black. It's because of the crime. It's because of the surroundings. The good schools aren't there. The, amenities aren't there. So, of course, you're going to move to where things are a little bit nicer. This is not a function of the melanin in your skin. To make it a function of the melanin in your skin is racist.
The question is, though, why? I would agree that the melanin in the skin is not the issue, but the question is why. For instance, about 10 years ago, I was delivering pizza, and I could tell when I pull into a community, especially an apartment area where there's a lot of communal living, in terms of, apartment building, 20, 30 units or whatever the case may be. I can tell from time I open the door into the lobby without seeing anybody, whether this is majority white or majority Black. Again, I will agree with you, it doesn't have to do with the color of your skin. But when you're going to deliver pizza at a home and you pull the door to the lobby or you enter the stairway and you're smelling urine, something is off. Because, again, as much as you want to say the white man is keeping us down or whatever the case may be, I don't think the white man is coming and peeing in the lobby of the majority Black apartment complexes. So what is it that we don't take pride? I'm not saying we because I'm Black, even though I don't identify as African American. Why is it that is so much evident? I will agree in that we should rule out the fact that it's the color of your skin. Is it poverty? Is it socioeconomical issues? But what is it that even if, look, I grew up in the Caribbean, right? And my mother, and even if you want to go back to my grandmother, they weren't rich in any sense of the word. But they can take pride in what you have without being rich. So even if you live in an area where the homes might not be the best or they might not be the best upkeep, at least can smell good. There's things you can control. And why is it that it's not?
It's not because their skin has more melanin. This is a culture issue. If you grew up in the backwoods of Appalachia and you came into money, I promise you, you're not going back to the backwoods of Appalachia to live. It's not a function of the melanin in the skin. It's a cultural issue. That's exactly what Myron just said, and that's exactly what he meant. Black people don't want to live among Black people. It's not about the melanin. And I think that as a culture and as Christians, we need to get beyond the fact that God gave some people a ton of melanin and he gave some people not a lot of melanin. We got hung up on this melanin, and there is a whole slew of issues underneath, like the spiritual, like the cultural, that need to be addressed.
Okay,
and
so
for Myron to say these things perpetuates this idea.
But the question is, okay, I will agree with you that the melanin has nothing to do with it. But again, you still not answer my question. Why? What is it about the culture? What is it about the socioeconomical stuff? Because some of these has nothing to do with where you're rich or poor. Like, for instance, my example, the stable smelling of urine. What is it that will cause someone who is educated, at least to some level, at least not illiterate, someone who is not mentally not there, someone who is maybe have a job, to say, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, let me go to the back of the stairs and pee in my community that I live in. I'm using that as a light example because there are other examples out there. Again, I will give him this. Majority of the crimes that occur, Black people kill more Black people, white people kill more white people. That's just a fact because we kind of live among each other. Black people kind of live among Black people, white people kind of live among white people. So using that as a fact. But of course, he's right. 2% of the population is kind of responsible for majority of the crimes. But it still is that, yes, we can rule out the color of your skin. I agree with you. But what is it about these communities? If you want to say you bring in Appalachia, what is it about that community that perpetuate drug use and all these things that you see in that area of the world or of the country? Because they have their own problems too. It might not be that they're driving by shooting up each other, but they have their problems with drugs and whatever the case may be. But what is it? Because we can say it's not the color of the skin, but there's definitely something going on there. And I'm not saying that I fully agree with him. But my point is that a lot of Black people would not live in a majority Black community or move to the hood to live when they can afford not to live there. That's my point. And then you have to ask yourself again, why?
I don't understand the question. Why is Skid Row the way that it is? Why are the slums the way that they are? It's no different from a so-called Black ghetto. Why is it the way that it is? All of those are the same question. And none of them are a function of melanin in the skin. None of them. That's why I don't agree with what he said. I know you just agreed and said that, we could take the race out of it.
But the thing is, I don't think he's saying it because of melanin in the skin. I think
he literally said Black people don't want to live among Black people.
And that's true. I think that he was just given the fact.
And that's given within the context of saying that Black people are running around.
I think you're reading between the lines a little bit too much.
No, it's within the context of him saying that Black people are running around and being racist with impunity and white people are sick of it. He's saying the same thing. The other, what's her name again? Whatever her name is.
Lily Gaddis.
Lily Gaddis. He's saying the exact same thing she's saying. And I'm saying the same thing about him that I said about her. They're both wrong. Their reasoning behind what they're saying is wrong. It sounds right. It sounds right because on the surface, you do see Black people moving away from the ghetto when they get a little bit of money. You do see that Black people are racist or whatever it is he said. I don't remember the verbiage of what he said, but I don't agree that it's a function of the fact that I don't think it's because they're Black. Now, there are bad actors that will link that bad part of the culture
but again, I don't
to
think
Blackness.
He said because they're Black. That's the part I'm kind of disagreeing with. I think he was just laying out facts. Of course, as evident by my questioning, the reason why is a little bit deeper. Of course, you list some of them. It could be spiritual, it could be socio-economical, it could be cultural, it could be a lot of other stuff. It could be government programs, it could be socialism, it could be so many other things. that are causing this thing. Of course, the ultimate reason is the human sinful nature. We know that. But the point remains that the numbers, as I said, numbers don't lie. That point remains that a lot of black people, at least, let me put it this way, the educated, well-off, middle class and above, choose deliberately not to live there and actively try not to live there.
Everybody is trying to not actively live in their slums. I promise you, it's not just black people, Myron Gaines. And I will say this as well. The reason why I'm trying to tease this out is because when we talk like this, we're creating a culture that makes it okay to look at people and have a prejudice, a predisposition to assume that a person is a certain way simply because their skin is a certain color. That's what made it possible for someone to say to me when I was speaking in a church gathering, "Oh, I'm surprised. I think you speak well." What is the underlying comment there? That because I'm black, I'm supposed to speak Ebonics? That's what I'm saying. Myron Gaines will say these things, and the other Liddy Gatz, whatever her name is, will say these things, creates a culture that makes it okay to approach people in the spirit of prejudice. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay. Well, we shall continue.
Key to respond, Ricky.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say that I agree that virtue signaling went too far, that political correctness went too far, but we're going from virtue signaling being the norm and being praised to now vice signaling being the norm and being praised. It's not just a matter of does this woman have the right to use that word? I believe that she has the right. I disagree with it. But is she now being rewarded with $500,000? Why are we rewarding people for performing vice instead of virtue? This is not healthy. This is destructive to our society. This is destructive to our social fabric, to our culture, to our ability to live with other fellow Americans. It's gross to reward someone for bad behavior. It's one thing to tolerate it, to say that she has the right to do it, but she called an autistic 5-year-old the N-word. Like, I'm sorry, but I feel like we're kind of like missing the point in the actual context. You can say that it's part of this bigger meta story of black and white America, but it actually is just like a short little clip, and you don't even know.
I agree with her. She's the first lady that spoke, right? I agree with her. And I think MarcLamont-Hill was right to call Myron out on this too, because he was going on and on about how black people are racist with impunity and they're using these different derogative terms for white people. But then when it came to the issue with Shiloh Hendrix, First Amendment, my feelings are irrelevant. Well, which one is it, Myron Gaines? It can't be one or the other. If your feelings are irrelevant as a result of the Constitution, then your feelings have to be irrelevant in regards to the Constitution when it comes to black people using derogative terms for white people as well.
Well, I would agree with that. I think MarcLamont-Hill did call him out on that. Right. And I agree with that call out because he was expressing feeling on both sides, but he didn't care about one. But the argument could be made that his feelings about one side has to do with maybe because he's black. But anyways, long story short, I do agree that MarcLamont-Hill did call him out correctly on that.
And I think what she said is very true. This is what I just said. For us to be debating on whether or not it's okay for people to say or speak these terrible words freely, again, we're missing the forest for the trees. Shiloh Hendrix felt that it was okay to call a boy the N-word, a small boy, the N-word, because he was doing something that offended her, and she justified it by saying, "Oh, he's acting like one." That very term, acting like one, like what? There's this prejudice there that this is how this group of people behave. And that's what I'm getting at. We're creating a situation in our country, in our culture, amongst one another, where I'm concerned, raising 4 black men, little boys, that they're going to walk around. Naturally, they're naturally going to be exposed to the evil in this world. I get that. But as Christians and as the adults in the room, can we not find a better way to interact with one another so that the environment, the temperature, the air that we're breathing, the water that we're swimming in is a little less toxic? It's a little less likely for someone to feel that she's justified in calling someone such a terrible name. And I think the only way that we can get there is through the gospel. I think all of these arguments that the people are talking about on the panel are ultimately futile because they're trying to solve a spiritual issue with cultural tools or legal tools or Yeah, and so this is why I said earlier that I'm so over this, because they're not going to come to a solution. In fact, being that this is the Piers Morgan Uncensored show, they're just going to start going at each other, talking over each other, and nothing gets solved. Meanwhile, the racism continues, the prejudice continues, the Black Lives Matter nonsense, the intersectionality, all of that nonsense that we speak out against at removing barriers continues, and it's never solved. And our children are growing up in this toxic sludge when we're supposed to be establishing and creating a better world for them.
All right, well, let's continue.
The context of it, and it's actually gross, and if we can't just say that it's gross and bad, then I don't really know where we are.
Well, I think it's interesting to me that Lily Gaddis, you retweeted Nick Fuentes, the white supremacist, by saying he said black people just raised $500,000 for a cold-blooded killer who stabbed a white teenager to death. So I don't want to hear one word about the Shiloh Hendrix fundraiser. Either everyone gets to be tribal or nobody does. Why would you retweet that?
Because I agree with it. Because we have to fight fire with fire. I mean, at some point, why are
nobody does?
Jesus Christ came to destroy that whole mentality of tribalism. He didn't come to save a particular group of people. Praise God that he didn't stop with revealing himself to the Jewish people. Thank God the Gentiles got a few of the scraps that fell from the master's table. And I am almost 300% sure, I'll say 299.99% sure, that the second lady, Gaddis, would call herself a Christian, would identify herself as a Christian. I'm sure she would.
Well, we'll find out.
I guess we'll find out.
Why are Jewish people allowed to be tribal? Why are black people allowed to be tribal? But as soon as white people stand up for themselves, we're labeled a racist. And by the way, you call people racist when you want them to stop talking about things.
No, I called you a racist because you admitted you were racist. Hang on. I called, just to be clear, I called you a racist because you openly, proudly admitted you're a racist. So it wasn't a question of exposing you or pointing my finger or trying to get this out of you. You proudly sat there, bold as brass, and said, yeah, I use the N-word all the time against black people. I'm a racist and I'm proud of it. That's what you did.
Racism is just having a preference. I prefer not to live around black people. I prefer not to.
No, it's not. It's not just a preference. Anyways.
Told you she showed her true colors. That's not trolling. That's racism. But okay.
Live in a country where white people in our country are disproportionately attacked by black people. Where in my country, you can have an Austin Metcalf where he asks a guy to leave and he gets stabbed in the heart. I prefer that. That's a preference. Now, what a real racist is, in my opinion, is seeing someone as less human. I'm a Christian. I believe everyone's created in God's image.
I called it. No, lady, you're not. Okay, I shouldn't say that because I don't know.
Well, not every Christian is saved, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of people say, Lord, Lord, but they wouldn't be able to tell Jesus from Adam. See, this is another reason why we're concerned about Christians confusing their conservatism with their Christianity. And this is why, perhaps, a lot of people who are not saved look at the Republican Party or look at people like her and equate that with Christian. And that's something that I think as Christians we need to be aware of. But
well, the church has a lot of blame to be placed there, though.
Absolutely.
Anyways.
So I don't see anyone as less human, but that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to have a preference and say, I don't like what happens to be coming out of this community or that community. How is that a bad thing? How is that not just a preference?
Because you've literally made black people sound lesser humans. You don't want to live around them. You want to use the N-word in relation to them, a word that you know causes that community unbelievable offense.
My fault? Is that my fault? If they have bad behavior, if they want to act in a certain way, if I have to cross the street and be afraid that
They. She's already othered them. She has already put so-called, air quotes, black people in their own category, they. She sounds just like Shiloh Hendrix. Exactly the same.
Maybe because of the crime statistics that are very real, by the way, is that my fault or is that their fault for having bad behavior?
That's mind-boggling to me for multiple reasons. I mean, we're talking about.
I am so frustrated at this because I'm having to agree with MarcLamont-Hill. Do you know how much pain this causes me? I'm having to agree with MarcLamont-Hill. Ay, but goodness, does she feel that way about the significant number of inbreeding that happens in whatever area of the country? I mean, fill in the blank. I won't even have to say it. Do you feel the same way about that? Or is it specific types of behavior, specific types of sin that set you off? Or are you, like many people in this country, like the people that we speak against in this country, so hung up on the issue of melanin in the skin that that's how you're approaching things? She's being disingenuous.
Yeah, she probably is, besides the fact that I disagree with her. And of course, again, MarcLamont-Hill is going to give some good points against what she's saying here. And of course, as I said earlier, I don't agree with anyone fully, but I don't disagree with anyone fully neither. But I think she's a little bit off her rocker in some of these things. But again, not arguing against the numbers, because again, I think the numbers speak for themselves. But when you start saying it is because
I don't think the
they're
numbers
black,
okay,
that's where I have an issue.
I don't think the numbers speak for themselves. I really believe that if you took perhaps any group of people and you put them in some of the conditions that so-called black people find them in right now, the sin, the flesh will rear its ugly head just as terribly.
Yeah, but I don't think the issues will be identical.
No. The issues wouldn't be identical, right? Because we're all so unique and we all have our cultures, and some of the most horrendous things that are present in every culture will be exacerbated if you put it in the same pressure cooker. The terrible things about so-called, air quotes, black culture, you and I don't believe in that term, but for the sake of conversation, would rear its ugly head just as much as it would rear its head on Skid Row, just as much as it would rear its head in backwoods Appalachia or whatever. And I'm not saying backwoods Appalachia so as to denigrate the people that live there. I'm talking about the so-called slum, low-class areas that people would label as such. The undesirable areas, the areas that people move out of because they're trying to get away from that. If you put people in that particular scenario, the sin nature is going to blossom. Why is this a surprise? It's not a function of where they're from or the melanin in their skin. It's a function of the sin nature. And that's what she doesn't get. That's what she doesn't get that makes her a racist, because she's pinning it on their ethnicity or on their whatever, on their skin color, and not on the heart issues that make this such a problem.
Well, anyways, Lamont-Hill continues.
Bad behavior, we've never lynched you. We've never enslaved you. We've never done any of the deep-seated structural forms of injustice to white.
And then MarcLamont-Hill goes and takes it way back to slavery and everything. None of them have the solution. Okay, I'm done. Sorry. Let's continue.
White people that white people have done to black people, and yet to claim some kind of moral superiority in the midst of, and again, in the context of a conversation where a white woman is calling a 5-year-old autistic child the N-word, and we're talking about black people's bad behavior. This is absurd. And the idea of fighting fire with fire, again, is a dishonest argument. Just to take us back to the point here, the people who are supporting Carmelo Anthony's campaign believe that he was wrongfully charged, and they're trying to get him legal defense. The people who are defending this woman are saying, yes, we know you called the 5-year-old autistic black child the N-word, and we want more of it. We approve of it. We support it. These are not the same thing. And it's bonkers to me that we couldn't all stand and say, hey, it is wrong to call.
I think that MarcLamont-Hill is also making a mistake here, that generalizing that everyone that donated to Carmelo Anthony's GoFundMe is doing so just because they want to help him with his self-defense. And everyone that's donating to Shiloh Hendrix is only doing it because they're racist. That's an overgeneralization that doesn't help things. There are many people that are donating to Carmelo Anthony simply because he's black and they want to support him in that particular front. And because he killed a white boy, they feel like he should be, black people rallied together. And there are people that are supporting Shiloh because they're like, oh man, you have to move out of there because you just said the N-word and folks are going to come after you. Here's some money. Let me help you move out. So he's overgeneralizing the groups of people that are supporting these two, and that doesn't help. The way that he's doing it is muddying the waters, and that doesn't help.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we kind of said this earlier, but yeah, everybody with Carmelo Anthony have this pure intention, and everyone else with Shiloh Hendrix have an evil intention. I don't think that's the case. Yeah. Even though, as I said before, I don't think the comparison is even fair. Mm-hmm. Because one, you're talking about someone who potentially murdered someone, and we're talking about someone who admitted that they call a 5-year-old kid the N-word.
Right.
So a 5-year-old autistic black child, the N-word. I mean, Myra, let me just ask you that question. I think this is a yes or no question. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think the woman was wrong to do what she did to that child in that park?
I don't approve of that. But what I will say is that it's very important to understand the entire context of what led us to this position. Because again, Metcalf and Hendrix is a microcosm of a much larger problem. Earlier, we were talking about tribalism when you were mentioning Nick Fuentes' tweet. Here's the thing. Black people could be as tribal as they want to be. You have people like Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Umar Johnson running around about black power and marry black woman and keep it in the hood and all this other stuff. But if white people assemble and say, you know what, white power, we need to keep our nation white, they're immediately ostracized and labeled as supremacists, and they get banned off every single platform. I find that interesting. And matter of fact, you went ahead.
Isn't that the same thing?
No, actually, it is the same thing. Because here's the problem with black people.
No, it's not.
Hold on, let me finish this. Black people practice the very racism they cry about. You guys can gather together and say Black Lives Matter, Black Power, but if white people get together and say white power, gather together, they're considered white supremacists and they get banned off every single platform. Why is that Jared Taylor and Nick Fuentes are banned off every platform for practicing white nationalism, but black people are allowed to stand every single platform getting interviews on the Breakfast Club?
Yeah, I probably agree with that because, quite honestly, if they had a show called Whitish, as they had a show called Blackish, there would have been a lot of backlash. If they had a TV station called White Entertainment Television, just like they have Black Entertainment Television or BET, there would be an issue.
I'd like to hear...
If they had a movement called White Lives Matter as compared to the Black Lives Matter, there would be an issue. So I definitely agree with him there, even though I don't agree with a lot of other things he said.
Yeah, I'd like to hear why MarcLamont-Hill thinks they're not the same thing. I think they are. I think it's racism of every stripe, and he seems to think it's different. I'd like to hear why he thinks that.
Explain that to me. There's a two-tier situation here where black people are able to benefit off of being racist while whites are not. And what we're dealing with right now in America is literally a backlash to this black supremacy has been able to run around unchecked for a long time, and no one has the balls to call it out. Here's the other thing I want to say. Everyone's flipping out over Shiloh Hendrix and saying the N-word.
Hey, can I respond to the point you just made, though?
No, hold on. Nobody flipped out like this when the United States was getting destroyed in 2020 because of black protesters destroying every liberal city in America. So I don't want to hear it about, she made $100,000 because she said the N-word. Who cares? They destroyed billions of dollars of structure because someone got killed who was a criminal. That's the problem in America. You guys get a privilege that no one else gets to enjoy. You could be racist.
Okay. All right, I have to hang on. I've got to hold it there. We've got another guest joining us. Mark, I'll come back to you to respond to that in a moment. But we've been joined now by Jacob Wells. He's the Christian founder of the Give, Send, Go donation site that both campaigns have been hosted on.
All right, so there you have it. I'll just end with some scripture verses. Colossians 4, verse 6. Let your speech be always with grace and seasoned with salt, that you may know how we ought to answer every man. And of course, James chapter 3, verse 2 to 11. For in many things we have offended all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horse's mouth, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, and are driven by fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a whirl of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and had been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeded blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Doth the fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Then I think of Matthew 15 and verse 19. For out of the heart proceeded evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornication, thieves, false witness, blasphemies. And Jeremiah 17 verse 19 and 20. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doing. Then I also, Proverbs 23 and verse 7, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. So those are some verses on the heart and on the tongue and on speech from the Bible. A wise man once said, your beliefs becomes your thoughts becomes your words becomes your actions becomes your habits becomes your values, and your values become your destiny. So I'll just end with that. Hey, even though I'm sitting here saying that I think people should be allowed to say whatever they want to say, I think as Christians that the Bible does call us to control our tongue and not to be directly offensive. So what is the N word, the F word, the S word, the H word or the C word or whatever the word that will directly offend someone? Maybe it might be best that we don't have those in our vocabulary.
And to just tack on to what you said, Galatians 5:13 says, "For brethren, you have been called unto liberty, only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another."
All right, so that was part 1. We're going to finish this episode in part 2.
Thank you so much for listening to the Removing Barriers podcast. Make sure to rate us everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher. Removing Barriers, a clear view of the cross.
Thank you for listening. To get a hold of us, to support this podcast, or to learn more about removing barriers, go to removingbarriers.net. This has been the Removing Barriers podcast. We attempted to remove barriers so that we all can have a clear view of the cross.